Hey guys and girls, what is the easiest and the very best way to fish isolated holes in patches of lily pads? Holes that are down in the lily pads. What's the best way to thoroughly fish them? Good morning, guys and girls. September 14, reading out of Catch a Better Life book, reading out of 2 Timothy 3:3. 2 Timothy, young minister. This is a letter from Paul to that young minister. Listen to this. Unloving, unforgiving, slanderers, without self-control, brutal, despisers of good. That's what 2 Timothy 3:3 says. 2 Timothy 3:3. Unloving, unforgiving, slanderers, without self-control, brutal, despisers of good. Despisers of good. Wow. Today's verse surely doesn't sound like Paul was talking about a fisherman, does he? Absolutely not. How about a group of 15 or 20,000 fishermen? Could we find one or more of these traits in some of them? Put all of these sins in one person, and we might be talking about the devil himself. Paul warned, this is the key, Paul warned that in the end times, this is what all men will become. All men will become unloving. They will become unforgiving. They will be slanderers. They will be out without any self-control. They'll fly off the handle at the slightest little thing. They'll be brutal, and they will despise good. They will despise good. Can you think of some people on the national level that are pretty much like that right now? The surrounding verses add more characteristics. Speaking of people who are lovers of money, they're boastful, they're lovers of themselves, they're haughty, unholy, they're traitors, and they're lovers of pleasure rather than God himself. How many of those will we find in our small group of fishermen? More importantly, how many of these things are we guilty of at times? Are we guilty of being unforgiving, unloving? Are we guilty of slandering other people? Are we guilty of not having self-control at times, despising good? How about being haughty or unholy? How about being lovers of yourself, patting yourself on the back, being haughty, unholy? How about loving pleasure? Loving pleasure more than God. When all of these things manifest in mankind at large, the end is close. The end is close. Jesus is coming back. We can't change the world, but we can watch closely and guard against any of these evil characteristics getting inside us. We watch and we guard closely and keep any of these characteristics from getting inside of us. Here's our tip for today. Power pole down to fish isolated holes in patches of lily pads. That's right. Lily pads grow in shallow water next to deep water. So that's one of the things that makes them really, really good, because anytime you find structure in shallow water, close to deep water, there's usually fish there. That's exactly where lily pads like to grow. They grow in shallow water, close to deep water. You want to look for those isolated holes. You want to look for a hole. Many times that hole is there because a bass has blown up on something and created that hole. You want to look for those holes in there, and when you see one or you pull into an area and you see several there that you can fish with your plastic worm or whatever you're flipping in there, and a frog will come back across the top of that hole, flipping the jig, or a plastic worm down there and letting it go down the hole. Power pole down where you can work in each individual hole very, very well. You want to make maybe 4 or 5 pitches in there with a worm. You want to maybe throw your frog by there and bring it across the top of that 3 or 4 or 5 times. The best way to do that, power pole down. Guys and girls, go out there and have you a great one today. And remember, I sure do love you.